Imagine being the firstborn son of a man chosen by God, and still being left alone in the heart of a desert, with no chance of survival. This is the heartbreaking story of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, who, in the blink of an eye, saw his entire life turned upside down. How would you react if everything you loved and knew was taken from you in such a cruel and merciless way? In this video you'll discover how Ishmael, a young man who seemed destined to be forgotten, turned his despair into strength, and transformed the unforgiving desert into his home. A story filled with betrayals, twists of fate, and miracles, revealing how destiny can change in the most unexpected ways when everything seems lost. If you're curious to find out how Ishmael faced impossible challenges and reshaped his future, stay with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave your like so you won't miss any of the next inspiring stories from the Bible. Get ready for a journey of pain, resilience, and above all, hope. A story that continues to teach us powerful lessons about faith and overcoming adversity. Long ago, in a distant land, there lived a man named Abraham. He was a man of deep faith, loyal and devoted to his God. Since his youth, Abraham believed in the divine promises, that one day he would become the father of a great nation. But as the years passed, that promise seemed to drift further and further away. Time, relentless as always, left its marks on his face, and on the heart of his wife Sarah. Abraham was already an old man, and Sarah, his faithful companion on countless journeys, also felt the weight of her years. The dream of holding a son in their arms seemed more distant with every sunrise. The nights that were once filled with dreams of the future had now become silent, heavy moments of unspoken sadness. Deep inside, both Abraham and Sarah questioned whether time had stolen their chance to witness the fulfillment of God's promise. One night, while gazing at the endless stars above, Abraham once again heard the voice of God, gentle as the whisper of the wind. The promise was repeated. He would become the father of a great lineage as countless as the stars scattered across the heavens. Although Abraham could not fully grasp the mysterious paths laid out by destiny, his faith never wavered. Yet the uncertainty of when this promise would come to pass continued to weigh heavily on his heart. Sarah, overwhelmed by her anguish, could no longer hide the pain that consumed her. The silent glances shared between them revealed the deep sorrow of waiting, a pain that words could no longer express. Sarah felt the weight of the unfulfilled promise growing heavier with each passing day. Time moved slowly, and with every new wrinkle etched upon her face, another worry took root in her heart. She knew that although Abraham's faith remained unshaken, time itself seemed to stand against them. The quiet nights turned into moments of deep reflection, and within her heart, Sarah began to shape a desperate plan. One morning, as the golden light of dawn slipped into their tent, Sarah approached Abraham. Her eyes that had witnessed so many seasons come and go, now carried a restless spark. She spoke with a steady voice, though it trembled with sadness beneath the surface. "Abraham, the Lord has kept me from bearing children. Please take my servant Hagar. Perhaps through her, I may build a family." These simple words masked a storm of emotions. Sarah knew she was suggesting something unusual, something born of pain, longing, and an aching desire to see God's promise fulfilled. After a brief silence, Abraham agreed, fully aware that this choice carried profound consequences. Hagar, the young Egyptian servant, was summoned and informed of her new role. With no say in the matter, she suddenly found herself at the center of a story far greater than she could have imagined. What seemed like a temporary solution was, in truth, the beginning of a future marked by trials and conflict. Inside Hagar's tent, the air grew heavy, thick with uncertainty. The servant who had once lived in the shadows of her masters was now carrying Abraham's child, the child of the patriarch chosen by God to father a mighty nation. Every movement within her womb, every sign of life, echoed a change that could never be undone. As the months passed, Hagar's pregnancy became visible to all, and with it, something new, something unsettling in the depths of her heart. Hagar, once humble and reserved, now felt something new taking root within her: pride. She, the servant, was giving the great Abraham the son that Sarah never could. The irony of it echoed in her thoughts like an undeniable truth. She, once invisible, now carried the future in her womb, and with it, a subtle but undeniable sense of power. But her transformation did not go unnoticed. The eyes that once remained lowered in respect now held a spark of defiance, a silent shadow of superiority that Sarah could not ignore. Day after day, the tension between the two women grew, tightening like a rope ready to snap. What had once seemed like the perfect solution to their greatest sorrow was now carving a new wound deep within the heart of the family. Inside Abraham's tent, The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment. Sarah, who had once offered her servant to Abraham with hope and faith, now found herself trapped in a storm of emotions she could no longer control. Every glance from Hagar, every movement of the young servant who carried Abraham's child, burned like fire in her soul. The silent pride radiating from Hagar pierced Sarah like a dagger, a constant reminder of what she herself could never have. And the weight of that reality turned to bitterness, a resentment that slowly poisoned her heart. What had once been a solution had now become a curse. And so Sarah's heart hardened. She began to treat Hagar with coldness, her gestures sharp, her words distant, as the fragile peace within the tent threatened to shatter completely. Trying desperately to regain a fragment of the dignity she had lost, Sarah struggled to rebalance the scales that now seemed hopelessly tilted against her. Yet, every attempt to reclaim her place within the family only fueled the flames of her own frustration. The servant who once lived in the shadows, unnoticed and invisible, now occupied a space in Abraham's life that Sarah had never imagined would slip from her grasp. As Hagar's belly grew, so too did Sarah's bitterness. It spread like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon, dark, inevitable and ready to explode. The nights between Sarah and Abraham became colder, heavier, filled with words that remained unspoken and emotions buried deep within aching hearts. Abraham, although aware of the tension that poisoned his home, seemed powerless before the shadow that now loomed over his family. And so, with each passing day, as the resentment between the two women reached its peak, Hagar, feeling the growing hostility like a tightening rope around her neck, began to consider the unthinkable, running away. She could no longer endure it. Sarah's cold stares, her cutting words, the suffocating atmosphere of the tent, it all became unbearable. Every day was a silent battle. Every night, a never-ending nightmare. Until, finally, at the breaking point of her soul, Hagar made a decision that would change everything. Before the first light of dawn touched the earth, while the desert camp still rested beneath the silent veil of darkness, Hagar rose. Quietly she gathered what little she had. With trembling hands and a heart full of pain, she stepped away from the tent that had been her prison for so many years. The cold wind of the desert night kissed her face as she walked, alone, carrying nothing but the child growing within her and the sorrow that bled from her heart. Hagar fled to the desert, seeking peace, seeking freedom, seeking anything but the life she had left behind. But the desert was merciless. Its vast silence and burning heat were as unforgiving as the pain she had known. The scorching sun bit at her skin. The absence of food and water turned her escape into an act of pure desperation. And as her wounded feet sank into the searing sands, Hagar realized, the desert was not just a place, it was a test. The burning sand clung to her wounded feet, and the weight of her pregnancy turned every step into a painful battle. Hagar, weary and on the brink of collapse, finally stopped beside a lonely spring hidden in the vastness of the desert, the Well of Shur. There, surrounded by silence and solitude, Hagar broke down. Her tears fell freely, mixing with the dust of the earth, the cries of a heart broken by rejection and exhaustion. But then, through the stillness of the desert, a voice unlike any other pierced the air, gentle yet filled with divine authority. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Startled, Hagar lifted her eyes, and before her stood a radiant figure, an angel of the Lord. His presence overwhelmed her, not with fear but with awe. She felt the weight of heaven in his words. Shaking, she poured out her heart, confessing her pain, her suffering, and the torment that had driven her to flee into the merciless wilderness. The angel listened, not with judgment, but with a compassion deeper than anything she had ever known. "Return to your mistress," he said. "Submit yourself under her hand." But these were not words of condemnation, they were words of destiny. The angel's voice continued, echoing through the desert winds, "I will multiply your descendants beyond number. And the son you carry shall be called Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction." Ishmael? God hears. In that sacred moment, a spark of hope ignited within Hagar's soul. She was not forgotten. She was not invisible. Heaven had seen her tears, and responded. With her heart renewed and a divine promise burning within her, Hagar rose. She knew the road back would not be easy, but she was no longer walking alone. And so, beneath the relentless sun, Hagar turned back toward Abraham's tent, carrying in her womb Ishmael, the son of the promise. Years passed, and once again, Abraham's camp pulsed with an energy that no one could have foreseen. This time it wasn't tension, it wasn't conflict, it was life, it was laughter. Sarah, the same woman who once cried in silence, burdened by the weight of her own impossibility, now smiled like never before. News of the miracle spread like wildfire across the desert. Whispers in the wind carried the unthinkable truth. Sarah, in the twilight of her years, had conceived a son. What once had been bitter laughter of disbelief, when the promise seemed ridiculous, was now transformed. Her laughter echoed through the tents, pure, joyful, overflowing with gratitude. God had fulfilled his promise. And the boy born from this impossible story was named Isaac. Isaac, meaning laughter, a living testimony that with God no limit is final, no season is over, and no dream is too late. But as Sarah cradled little Isaac in her arms, her heart, for a brief moment, wandered elsewhere. Her gaze turned, almost involuntarily, to Abraham's first son, Ishmael. No longer a child, but now a young man, strong, present, a reminder of choices made in the silence of waiting. And while the camp celebrated Isaac's birth, while laughter filled the air, a shadow, subtle but growing, began to form in Sarah's heart. For with Isaac's arrival, a new light shone over Abraham's legacy. But every new light also cast a new shadow. The sun that once brought warmth to Abraham's camp now began to cast longer and darker shadows. And one of those shadows fell silently over Ishmael. Sarah, with the gaze of a protective mother, observed the two boys together. But something in Ishmael's eyes disturbed her deeply, a glint that she could not decipher. It wasn't innocence. It wasn't mere curiosity. It was something colder, something between indifference and defiance. Every gesture, every glance from Ishmael seemed to carry an unspoken message. Before Isaac, I was the first to be loved, the first to be embraced by Abraham. And the laughter that once united that family now echoed with a strange weight, like a distant storm approaching. The rivalry between the two half-brothers grew in silence, like a small ember forgotten at the bottom of a well, waiting for the wind to ignite it. Sarah felt it in her heart. At night, while the camp slept under the stars, she remained awake, her thoughts consumed by an uneasiness she could no longer silence. She knew the birth of Isaac was a divine promise fulfilled, but also the beginning of a new and unpredictable chapter. And Ishmael would be part of that chapter. Now a teenager, Ishmael watched his little half-brother grow, his gaze oscillating between curiosity and bitterness. Ever since Isaac had come into the world, it seemed that the sun only shone for him. Abraham, who once poured all his affection upon Ishmael, now divided his heart between the firstborn and the child of promise. Ishmael felt this wound open within him, raw, bleeding, impossible to ignore. Until one day, during a great celebration for Isaac's weaning, while music and laughter filled the air, Ishmael could no longer hold back what was burning inside him. Surrounded by guests, food and joy, the young man let out a brief laugh, a mocking laugh, directed at little Isaac. A laugh that sliced through the moment like a hidden blade. What should have been an innocent sound became charged with irony, with rebellion. That laugh was not just a sound. It was a declaration. A silent cry that echoed through the desert winds, "I am the first." Sarah, watching everything from a distance, felt a sharp pain in her chest. She knew that brief, almost imperceptible moment was the beginning of something greater, a conflict that could no longer be silenced. Though Isaac was the son of the promise, Ishmael carried within him a strength that could not be ignored. His laughter, far from being a simple childish tease, echoed like a warning. It was the sound of something deeper, something ancient awakening within him. A tension that grew silently, like dark clouds gathering on the horizon before a violent storm. The peace that once reigned in Abraham's tent was now fragile, threatened, ready to shatter at any moment. Sarah, burdened with anguish, could no longer silence the voice within her. It was no longer just a mother's fear, it was conviction. A shadow that pressed on her heart, refusing to fade. And so, with trembling hands but an unwavering gaze, she approached Abraham. Her voice broke the silence like a blade. "This boy, Ishmael, will not inherit with my son Isaac." Her words were firm, but her heart was in turmoil. She knew the weight of what she had spoken. Words that once released could never be taken back. But she also knew Isaac's future depended on it. Abraham stood frozen, his heart crushed beneath the unbearable weight of her request. Ishmael was his son, flesh of his flesh, and the mere thought of sending him away pierced deeper than any wound. But the call to protect the promised heir, to secure the destiny God had set before them, was a force impossible to resist. With tears filling his weary eyes and sorrow suffocating his chest, Abraham made the decision that would forever scar his soul. And so, The next morning arrived. The sky itself seemed to mourn, painted in a somber gray as if heaven grieved with them. With a heavy heart, Abraham placed a piece of bread and a skin of water into Hagar's trembling hands. Their eyes met, eyes that once shared moments of hope, now filled only with silent farewell. Without a word, Hagar took Ishmael's hand. The boy looked back only once, searching for a father's last glance. And Abraham stood there, watching them walk away. Their silhouettes grew smaller with every step, their footsteps falling like drumbeats of sorrow across the barren earth. Ahead of them stretched the desert, vast, merciless, infinite, a land ready to swallow their dreams. Behind them, Abraham's figure slowly disappeared into the mist of the horizon, like a distant memory, like a dream fading with the first light of dawn. Destiny had led them into the unknown, a journey that would push their faith and resilience to the very edge. The scorching sun showed no mercy. Every grain of sand beneath their feet became a burning threat, searing their skin and draining their strength. The waterskin Abraham had given them was soon empty, and the vastness of the desert began to reveal its cruelest face. Thirst gripped them like an invisible hand tightening around their throats. Their lips cracked, their bodies weakened, and each step felt heavier than the last. Despair surrounded them like the endless horizon of sand, as if the desert itself was swallowing them whole. And then, exhausted and unable to go on, Ishmael stumbled and fell. His young body collapsed, breathless, defeated by the merciless heat. With her heart breaking, Hagar lifted him in her arms and placed him gently beneath the shade of a small bush, a fragile barrier between him and the burning sky. She could not bear to watch him die. And so, taking a few trembling steps away, she sat down and began to weep. Her cries echoed across the empty desert, the desperate lament of a mother drowning in sorrow and helplessness. But then, in the midst of silence, a voice reached her. It wasn't thunder from heaven. It wasn't a vision in the clouds. It was a voice deep within her, full of compassion, full of peace. Hagar, do not be afraid. For God has heard the boy's cries right where he is. With tear-filled eyes, Hagar looked up. And there, as if the desert itself had hidden it until this very moment, she saw it, a well of water, shining like a miracle, waiting for them. Hope surged through her veins. She ran to the well, filled the skin with fresh water, and hurried back to Ishmael. She pressed the water to his lips, and life returned to him. And in that moment, beneath the relentless sun, Hagar understood they were not alone. A promise still guided them. A promise that would one day turn that boy, abandoned in the desert, into something far greater than she could ever imagine. And for the first time, the sun seemed less cruel, as if even the desert recognized the weight of that moment. Hagar, with tears still drying on her face, looked at Ishmael, now alive, now reborn, with a gaze that mixed relief, reverence, and awe. The boy who minutes ago lay on the threshold of death now stood before her, slowly regaining his strength with every sip of water that touched his cracked lips. The desert, which moments before had seemed like a tomb of silence and despair, was now transforming, not into an oasis of comfort, but into sacred ground where destiny was being forged. God had spoken once more. But this time the promise was far greater than mere survival. Ishmael would not only live, he would become the father of a great nation. These divine words echoed within Hagar's heart like thunder in the stillness of the desert. And suddenly the endless sands around them no longer felt like a prison. They were a stage. A colossal stage where the story of her son would unfold. A story marked by courage, resistance, and greatness. Hagar looked at Ishmael and saw beyond the frailty of that moment. She saw kings. She saw warriors. She saw a future carved by the hand of God himself. The desert wind, once cruel and unforgiving, now seemed to carry whispers of glory, of a lineage that would shake the world. For the first time in a long while, peace washed over Hagar's soul. Not a peace born from comfort, but from certainty. The certainty that they were not alone. That Ishmael's life was not an accident of fate, but the fulfillment of a divine purpose. And so Hagar rose. She gathered her strength. She took her son's hand, the hand of the boy who would one day become a man of the desert, a man of destiny, and set her eyes on the horizon. There, under the merciless sun and shaped by the burning sands, Ishmael grew. Years passed, and the boy became a warrior. His skin was bronzed by the sun, his heart hardened by survival, and his hands learned the bow like an extension of his own soul. The desert, once a place of exile, had become his kingdom. A wild, untamed land where Ishmael would thrive, where the promise would live. Ishmael grew beneath the relentless sun, shaped by the unforgiving winds and the scorching sands of the desert. No longer just a child of survival, he became a warrior of the wilderness, a master of the bow. His arrows flew with precision, like whispers of destiny cutting through the air. His skill and determination transformed him into a figure of admiration and respect among those who crossed his path. The boy once abandoned to die was now a man who walked with unshakable pride, his head held high, knowing deep within that he carried the weight of a divine promise, the seed of a great nation. By his side, Hagar watched him with eyes full of pride and gratitude. Every time Ishmael raised his bow, she saw not only a warrior, but the living proof of God's faithfulness. The same God who had heard her cries in the desert was now fulfilling his word before her very eyes. The desert, once a place of suffering and despair, had become the forge that shaped a man of unbreakable character. A man destined to leave his mark upon the world. His descendants would multiply like the grains of sand carried by the wind, countless, unstoppable, without end. Ishmael's story echoes through time like a powerful reminder, a testament that even in the darkest valleys, there is always hope, that abandonment can give birth to strength, that the most barren desert can become the very ground where destiny is forged. His life teaches us that when God speaks, when God promises, no desert is too dry, no distance is too far, no trial is too great, because his promise is unbreakable. And as we reflect on Ishmael's journey, we are invited to look within. What are the deserts we must cross? What battles are we facing right now? Maybe, just like Ishmael, we will find strength where we least expect it, and discover that what once seemed like the end was only the beginning of something extraordinary. A story written not in the sand, but in eternity. Now it's your turn. Have you ever felt lost, abandoned, without a way out? But somehow, in the silence, God was there, lifting you up? Tell us in the comments, your story matters here. And if this journey moved your heart, if Ishmael's story inspired you, then be sure to like this video, share it with those you love, and most importantly, subscribe to Faith in Action. Together, we will keep exploring the most powerful stories of the Bible, stories of courage, hope, and unshakable faith. Because here, every story is a reminder, God never abandons those who trust in him.